Good morning, everyone. So first of all, we're really sorry about the technical difficulties that we experienced earlier today. However, despite the small delay that we have, the results that we're about to present are not any less exciting. So the Swiss startup ecosystem is booming. We crossed 2 billion in investments. Now everybody asks themselves, can we do better than that? Can we get to 3 billion investments? And there are two people who can actually answer that. Thomas Heimann, the Deputy General Secretary at SECA, and also Stefan Chiora, the co-authors of the Swiss Venture Capital Report. Stefan Chiora, the Editor-in-Chief at Startupticker, will now start with the presentation of this year's 10th Swiss Venture Capital Report's results. Stefan, a warm welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Silvan. Welcome again from my side, this time with sound. Sorry for the problems here. And we decided to start the whole presentation again. So we will tell you in the next 25-30 minutes what we found out about startup investments in 2021. To start with, it was a very good year. You can see it on these two slides. We crossed the 3 billion mark in investment, and we had more than 350 financing rounds of Swiss startups. And what you also can see is that the growth of the invested amount is accelerating. So the growth rate of the years 2018 and beyond is much higher than the growth rate before. So that is also a very good sign showing that the scene is really taking off. When we look at the top 20 financing rounds, we see a bit the usual picture here. So there's a great diversity regarding sectors, regarding Cantons. We have 9 biotech startups, so that's again here the leading sector in the top 20 rounds. In total, 63% of the investment flowed into these top rounds. This is historically seen relatively few money, and this is caused by other also high growth rounds that Swiss startups were able to close in 2021. What is also very encouraging that more and more Swiss investors are active in the top 20 rounds. So we had 13 of the rounds with Swiss investors involved. This is also historically high and shows that the whole ecosystem is evolving. One point where there might be potential is that we have only 2 pure SaaS players here in the ecosystem, here in the top 20 round with Nexthink and Frontify. And after 2 years of digitization push, this could be more, I think. So now Thomas Heimann will tell us more, first about funds and then about sectors and phases of the investments.
Thank you, Stefan. Also from my side, good morning. For this presentation, we go to the funds, VC funds. We did a survey among VC investors, business angels, last December, and we received feedback from these investors, and around 30 or 35 funds are now in fundraising. So this is an astonishing number when we compare that to what we have seen in the past, where we had only a handful of VC funds every year. And this trend accelerated over the last 2-3 years, and now we have 35 funds. Diversified among sectors, different stages. You can also see the size of the funds crossing the 100 million, so that's a critical size. So overall, it's a very promising trend. It's very good news for institutional investors to invest in this promising asset class. When you compare, or when we have a look at the fund sizes, so when we compare that with Europe, it's the average fund size is between 40 to 60 million. In Switzerland, we are about this level, but it's still below the level reaching every year in the US, far above 100 million. But it's a good starting point, and this money will be hopefully invested in Swiss startups over the next years. Some funds, they have a little bit the focus more on Swiss startups, earlier stage, and then we have also later or larger funds with a focus abroad in US or Europe or Israel. Then we have also this slide here on the right-hand side. You can see the fund sizes, and around 41% close the fund with above 100 million, and obviously 59% below 100 million. On the left-hand side, you can see the numbers of funds closed last year, and we had 14 funds which had the closing in 2021, and as we showed before, 35 are in fundraising. Coming back to the investment volume, so funds are one thing, an important thing, and then it will be invested, the money will be invested in startups, and here we have the numbers for 2021. And ICT, or fintech in particular, is now the largest sector with over 850 million, and in particular driven by the transaction of VFox. VFox raised over 550 million last year. Then combined, we reached 1.5 billion for ICT fintech. Life science is still a major driver in our ecosystem. Life sciences is again over 1.1 billion. Biotech last year 820 million, now around 770 million. It's a little bit below also in terms of activities, but it's still the high level. Then we see also encouraging trends in medtech, with plus 51% in volume, and then also in smaller sectors, but they are growing faster at the moment. It's clean tech, digital health, micro, nano, and consumer products, plus 60% in volume. On the next slide, we see the development related to financing activities. And there we see the largest increases took place in digital health, plus 44%, and then clean tech, plus 36%, followed by ICT and fintech with 25% plus. So, as I said before, the clean tech numbers and digital health, the numbers overall are still the lower level, but they are growing faster at the moment. And we see in life sciences a little bit the consolidation with medtech rounds minus 30% and biotech rounds minus 12%. Now it's the 10th report, and this enables us to also do some comparison over in history, what we achieved and what that could mean for the future. And here we have the numbers for the last 3 years, the compounded annual growth rates, also the annual average growth per year. The dark bars are the ones which is related to the investor capital. So the average annual growth rate was 35% over the last 3 years, and the growth for financing round was 15% over the last 3 years. And you can see clean tech and digital health reached the highest growth in activities and volumes. Still, as I said, lower level, but encouraging. And then fintech and biotech, and in particular fintech this year, achieved or leading the volume growth over the last 3 years. Then it's also important to not only have the sector level numbers, we also do some analysis related to the phases where the financing rounds took place. So we have the seed, the early and the later stage rounds. And we see last year the largest increase in later stage rounds related to volume growth, plus 72%. So the largest round, VFox, for sure was a main driver here, but still a high level. Then seed rounds plus 44%, and early minus 11%. But early, it was last year a very good year for these Series A rounds. But when we compare that, we have also an analysis in the report related to number of financing. There we see the highest growth took place in seed rounds, plus 66%. And we see a consolidation among later stage and early rounds. That's a little bit an important aspect. Then share of later stage rounds counts for 74%, and we had more than 9 times more money in fintech, and also remarkable growth in medtech later stage, in ICT early stage. And as I said before, biotech was a little bit the exception last year. We saw in early stage, in particular, only the half of the money invested compared to last year. You can see the top 20, how is this distributed among top 20. Then we have also, you can see the different colors, top 1 to 3, 4 to 5, and then above the top 20. So overall 63%. It's quite diversified, the money invested. Then we had a remarkable increase in numbers of rounds up to 10 million, 75% increase. And the median of the financing rounds, we always take the median as it is well diversified. So this one decreased to 2.3% per round. That's a decrease of 21%. The reason for that we will see later on, but we had less activities in the space between 10 to 20 million last year, and biotech was a driver for that. The median is 5.4 million. It's still higher than all other sectors, but we saw there the largest decrease compared to last year. Fintech 4.6 million median, and ICT 1.8 million. So overall we had 355 rounds, and out of these 355 we were aware of the money invested in 290 rounds. That's 82%, and this number again increased thanks to our research partners. We have now a very good coverage rate. So as I said before, we did some analysis about where the money invested per round, and here you can see we did that for several years. The gray or the blue bar is the one for over 9 years. The orange is the 5 years compounded annual growth rate, and the gray is the 3 years CAGR. And you can see that the 10 to 20 million, the second last on the right-hand side, achieved overall still a growth rate, but the lowest growth rate over the last years. So we talked always about the value of death. Earlier it was maybe a little bit earlier, 2 to 10 million, and now it seems that the 10 to 20 million is a little bit the bottleneck. So we see a lot of seed activities, money up to 5 million seems we are well covered, but when it comes to the next round, we have still some challenges to tackle. We see also promising activities when it comes to the rounds above 20 million. There we have also the foreign investors which are coming, but we need more acceleration in the future, also in the 10 to 20 million range. Here you can see, as I said, the numbers above 20 million in blue. Startups last year, 23 startups raised above 20 million. So this compares well to the level in the past. We had only 5 when we started with this report in 2012, 10 years ago. So a very good and promising trend. But the orange bar, 5 startups received more than 100 million. This is a little bit stagnant. We see some consolidation. And when we look abroad, in Germany, in France, or in the UK, we see more activities in rounds above 100 million. And this is also then a little bit, we have there some potential. And if we can fill the gap between 10 to 20, we may be also then better positioned to close financing rounds above 20 or 100 million in the future. Some trends here regarding ICT and fintech. So on the left-hand side, the year-over-year growth for all ICT rounds, around 700 rounds. And you can see last year, 2021, we had almost double the size of ICT rounds, between 5 to 10 million. And then also, and it's very promising, and it's the driver, it's the fintech sector, 20 million. There we had a growth of 225%. That's more than or tripled the money invested in these rounds above 20 million. You can see it on the right-hand side, the fintech rounds, a large increase in rounds above 20 million, and a little bit decrease in numbers between 10 and 20 million. So in the biotech sector, and that's life sciences, biotech and medtech, and that's the reason for the decreasing median, which we showed earlier. You can see in 2021, we had a decrease in numbers of financing activities above 20 million, 25% minus 25%, then between 10 and 20, minus 67%. That's the reason that we saw also the decrease in numbers between 10 and 20, in particular this year. And then we saw some encouraging activities in numbers of rounds up to 5 million. So very good numbers, but still some challenges to tackle. Thank you.
So we now come to the Cantons. There are 2 main trends I want to mention. First is we have a kind of trend to concentration in the 2 cantons with ETH, so in Zurich and the canton of Vaud. Both had very high growth rates last year, in particular Zurich. Zurich startups were able to more than double the invested capital compared to 2020. So that's a very good development for Zurich, and the growth for Vaud is also above average. And the second trend is that there are also smaller cantons with less startup activities that are able to attract large financing rounds. You can see on the slide Ticino, Lucerne, Schwyz. And in Ticino, Schwyz, there are 2 companies responsible for this high amount, so it's also possible to close larger financing rounds in those cantons. If you look at the number of the financing rounds, the picture is a little bit different. There we saw a very good development for the canton of Zug, and burn because of a better coverage, but also because of higher activities, is now ranked fourth if you rank Cantons by the number of financing rounds. We always list trade sales and IPOs in the report, and this time we decided to make one analysis regarding these trade sales. You can see that the numbers also growing strongly in 2021. You also see that most of the buyers are from abroad. There's a relevant share of these trade sales that the startups do instead of a growth round. So then it's clear that the buyer must be abroad or must be a bigger company to help then the Swiss startup or the technology of this Swiss startup to grow. Here, with this high number of trade sales, you can clearly see that a lot of money is in the market, not only for investments, but also for takeovers. Summing up. In general, the trend is very good. So regarding startups, we have two quite good developments on both ends of the life cycle. So Thomas mentioned these seed rounds. So the number of startups that are able to attract financing in Switzerland is already very high in Switzerland compared to other countries. This strength is now even getting better. And we also saw this increase in the invested amount in later stage rounds at the other side of the life cycle, which is also very important because this is really the driver of the growing total invested amount in Swiss startups. On the side of the investors, we see a lot of activity, a lot of funds. We also see that this high growth in seed rounds is clearly driven by higher activities from Swiss investors. And again, on the other side, in the top 20 rounds, there are more Swiss investors active. So this means there are more Swiss investors in this top league of investment companies. And the big Swiss investors are also more and more active in Switzerland. Then, of course, there's some potential. We spoke about that. One thing where's potential are these rounds above 100 million. That is stagnant. We also saw that fintech is developing quite well, but general ICT is also more or less stagnant if you look at the number of financing rounds. So there is, I think, really room for improvement regarding investments in these B2B SaaS companies. Then we have clean tech, healthcare, IT. That is very fine regarding the growth rate, but the level is still low. And we have trade sales replacing growth rounds, which means that it is easier to find an attractive trade sale option than to close a growth round, maybe exactly in this range between 10 and 20 million that Thomas spoke about. I want to end on a positive note, something that is not so clearly can be seen in these figures. What makes me quite optimistic is that all these potential problems that I spoke about, that they are being discussed in the ecosystem. You may have heard that there's a report from the Federal Council now addressing these challenges. There's also more attention from the players, from startups, from investors regarding the political framework conditions of the Swiss startup scene. And I think there will happen more from this side in the future than happened in the last years. And this will help the startup scene as a whole. Yeah, that's from my side. Thank you very much. I just want to mention the magazine, 80 pages. You can download it for free. You can also order it. Just get back to us. And if you have questions, you can always address Thomas or me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Thomas and Stefan, for your insights. It's certainly a very exciting time to be part of the Swiss ecosystem. So up next, we're going to continue with some partner presentations, and I'm going to switch the slide here for that. And the first one up is Pascal von Mont, the president of the Startupticker Foundation. Pascal, a very warm welcome. Here is your microphone and also the clicker.
Thank you very much. Welcome. It's my pleasure to give you today some facts and figures about the whole activities of Startupticker. So Startupticker is a news platform, and therefore readers are key for us. And it's great to see that we have an increase of 10% in the unique readers, a growth that sums up to roughly 350,000, which means that we have more than 10,000 unique visitors per week. And as you see on the slide, the increase is mainly or also from abroad. So we have 50% of readers from abroad, from US, Germany, which I would say means that innovation from Switzerland is super attractive in Switzerland and abroad. And Startupticker is focused on news and information. So we provide mainly news, but with 2 publications, we deliver also analysis based on this news and on the database. One publication is the Swiss Investor Capital Report and the half-year report, the update, which is the leading investment report in Switzerland that is presented today. The other is the Swiss Startup Radar. This is a 1-year report that is focusing on a key topic relevant for the whole ecosystem, but also for the political discussions. And both of these reports are cited in main media, as you see here, and by politicians, which is always good for us, and authorities. As I said, Startupticker is focused on news, and therefore we ourselves will not launch other publications, but we are ready for kind of collaborations with partners if there is a specific topic, and I would say mainly partners with a lot of money and capacity for co-execution. The whole work done by Startupticker is done by a super team that you see here, working at the front and in the back. And I would say many, many thanks to this amazing team working every day with a lot of passion for the whole ecosystem. And it's not only the team, I mean the Startupticker and the whole work done is supported by more than 40 partners. And first of all, it's the principal partner Innosuisse. There are key partners UBS, Swiss Entrepreneurs Foundation and Geber-Trüff Stiftung, but also more than 40 partners, supporters and collaborators that make this effort possible. So with a big, big thank you for the team, for the partners, and for all the readers and users for Startupticker, I wish you all a wonderful day.
Thank you very much, Pascal. And we're actually continuing with one of the key partners here. Christoph Falk is joining us remotely. He is the Deputy Head of Startups and the Next Generation Innovators at Innosuisse, and he will be joining us over Zoom.
Hello, everybody. Sorry, I guess I missed the timing. I'm just share my screen. Just a second. There you go. I hope, unfortunately, I cannot hear anything, so I hope you can hear me and you can see now my presentation. First of all, hello, everybody, and thank you for having me. And big thanks also to Startupticker for the great work and valuable work. So my name is Christoph Falk. I am the deputy head of the startup division at Innosuisse and the supervisor of our Innosuisse startup coaching. And I'm happy to briefly introduce Innosuisse to you. So Innosuisse is the national innovation agency, and we promote science-based innovation in the interest of the economy and society in Switzerland. And we do this in all disciplines, mainly via a bottom-up approach. Our support can be divided into 3 thematic areas. So we have instruments and programs that help you to implement your innovation projects. We have initiatives and measures that for networking and expanding knowledge. And finally, as startups are relevant innovation drivers, we also provide support for the creation and development of a startup. Regarding this last one, which might be the most interesting one for this audience, there we provide support along the whole life cycle of a startup. So no matter at what stage you are or in what industry you are, I'm convinced that we can provide you help that really has impact. So our support ranges from courses to get the toolkit that is needed to set up a startup, to individualized long-term coaching where you are accompanied by experienced founders that help you found and build your company. We also have internationalization camps where we help you to validate and enter into foreign markets, and also international trade fairs where we help you to showcase your startup or your innovation at famous international trade fairs. And below you can also see some figures of 2021. Maybe you were one of those participants, or maybe you're also one of the active startups in our coaching program. If not, I invite you to check our Innosuisse guide, Innosuisse.guide, where this guide will help you to find the appropriate help and the appropriate support instrument. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christoph. And up next, we're going to continue with our next partner, Digitalswitzerland. Daniela Christen will join. She is the head of startup, scale-up, and innovation at Digitalswitzerland. Daniela, a very warm welcome to the stage.
Thank you so much, Silvan. I'm really happy to be here. It's actually my first time on stage in my new role, as Silvan said, as Head of Startup and Scale Up at Digitalswitzerland. And therefore, I would also like to say a big thank you to Stefan and Thomas for this amazing work, for this many, many years that you're doing this, collecting all these numbers. It actually really helps me and also Digitalswitzerland to put the right focus on and to see where we can support. And I'm, of course, more than happy to see this big increase of investments, but also that more regions are contributing to the total amount of investments. So yeah, we at Digitalswitzerland, we're a non-profit organization with more than 200 members that supporting us on the mission to become a digital leader internationally as well as Switzerland. Yeah, and also like we're doing a lot of programs and a lot of events as well, but of course we also focus on the area of startups, and I've brought some slides with me today to also show you what the programs and events are this year. One of the focus areas is definitely to strengthen the ecosystem, so we see ourselves as a connector here between the members and the startup organizations or also the startups itself. And two new focus areas that I want to also push on is on one hand to foster the entrepreneurial mindset, because we believe that if we want to have more startups, we also have to start really early. And the other part is that I really want to empower more women to also found startups and also invest into it. So as I said, I want to show you quickly some of the programs that we're doing, starting very globally. So together with 4 other organizations, Swissnext, Innosuisse, Présence Suisse, and Swiss Global Enterprise, we are the private-public initiative called Swiss Tech. And the idea is that we bring Swiss startups to the biggest global tech conferences all around the world. And by that, of course, also promoting Switzerland as a leading digital nation. Then we're also proud partner again of the Swiss Startup Days this year, taking place in Bern physically on the 19th of May. So if you haven't done so yet, make sure you get your ticket. It's really a great opportunity to meet other startups, investors, corporates, and to network. Same goes for the NOAA conference, which was taking place the first time in Zurich last December and will again take place in Zurich in December this year. Then a very cool, new, unique format we created together with Swisspreneur, with Silvan. So we were cruising Lake of Zurich last year with 70 scale-ups, 50 startups, and 30 investors. And since it was such a big success, we decided to continue this format, do it even twice, once on Lake Geneva as well. And that's not all. We're also going to hit the slopes end of March together with a lot of scale-ups and startups. Really, really excited for that. Registrations will be open beginning of February. One of our biggest programs and initiatives is to connect our members with the startups. So together with Venturelab and the program Venture Kick, we are matching our corporate members with Swiss startups. Really cool initiative. We match about 8 to 90 startups with around 60 members. So really cool to see the success stories out of this as well. And last but not least, our very own program, the Swiss Startup Battles, taking place during the Swiss Digital Days. Again, this year, we want to focus a little bit more on the regional startups actually in the field of green tech. Yeah, really excited for that. And with that, we'll finish here and looking forward for the rest of the presentations.
Thank you very much, Daniela. I just want to sign up for all those events and activities. That's super cool. Now, joining us from close west is Jordi Montserrat, the Managing Director at Venture Kick and Venturelab, and he will join us remotely over Zoom. Jordi, a very well welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Silvan. Thank you very much to the whole team for welcoming us. It's always a great pleasure to join this event. Allow me to share my screen rapidly and to jump into our presentation. I'm here proudly representing Venture Kick. Many of you, of course, in the audience hopefully know Venture Kick. It's been 15 years. We'll be celebrating our 15th years this year. And we are now very happy to actually continue this adventure. I'm here to share as well a few numbers with you as we started, as you know, every year with this collaboration also with the Venture Capital report, and we are happy to publish also what has been happening this year. You can download also the full report. So if you use the QR code, I will show it a few times during this presentation. In a nutshell, it's been a very intense year. It was almost 5.5 million that was invested in startup, and the results after 15 years, after 14 years now, are very strong. You will find a lot of details. The ones that I like to emphasize as well is that we almost reached actually end of last year 40 million invested. It's very much at the early stage. And we've seen that the impact with all the leverage that was done by those startups who created they start as project, and now we really see the scene. I think it was reflected in the report with the number of funds which are now investing in the early stage. So I think one of our original ambition that it was to increase the number of spin-off, to accelerate their access to investor, has also triggered and contributed to an amazing momentum. And we see that the total amount attracted by those companies who are eventually incorporated on the project, this we include in our analysis also the public funds, which are about one quarter of these funds. And it's almost, so it's more than 5 billion, so over 5.3 billion, which are attracted, and they represent today in the active companies over 9,000 jobs. So a very strong, as we see, and it is high value job, a very strong contribution. We're also proud, of course, to also look at where they stand in the Swiss ecosystem. 59 of these alumni made it in the top 100 this year. You will find a lot of details. What I like is to emphasize maybe just a few ones. We look historically, of course, around the total amounts which are being invested in the company. 3 billion was only in the equity part. As said, if we accumulate everything, we reach over 5 billion. What is also very interesting is to take the long-term perspective. And I think that one point we really see is that these investments over time, so the average amount invested in startups is 8.97, so close to 9 million, the average amount that has been invested. And if you look at the long-term startup, we were at 9,000, but the average numbers is around 34 jobs and plus 20 million. So the dynamic is very strong in this. And of course, it's good news. We have the chance to have amazing partners. So we thank them again at the end, the opportunity to thank them here. But it's also continuing on a stronger path. Even we want next year to invest an additional 6.1 million that will go into supporting at the early stage. We see that growth and the funding at the higher level is an important case, but all of this is only possible if we have, of course, continue to have a very strong pipeline of new good projects which are coming into this. A few highlights very quickly. I think it was a year of exits, 10 exits, 1 IPO in our alumni. IPOs were discussed. It's been very strong. Only the top 10 rounds, we see those big rounds. Actually, if you look in the alumni, our top 10 rounds are twice above 100 million. So we see that that's really been generating. And I have a lot of other ones, which I like to also emphasize very much also. And I think you heard about them by now. But the first CO2 collection plan with Climeworks open this year. We had several projects which made the headlines also at the global level. And I think it's really good to continue with this, of course, to give the Swiss visibility, the visibility of Switzerland abroad. You can dive also into this adventure. And here is always to re-emphasize, we talk a lot of numbers today, but behind these numbers are the entrepreneurs. What do they do? How do they do it? Where do they start? So we have our Kickers World, we call it, channel. You can connect here, so don't hesitate to go and look at how these startups start. Who is behind these particularly? What do they do? How do they do it? And where do they go? Plant them, I mean, check them at the early stage. And of course, accelerating their development is really key. I want to conclude, as usual, presenting these. Don't hesitate to, of course, follow these startups, to, of course, invest in them, because here we're talking to a lot of investors. And the last thing that I'd like to say is thank you very much again to all of the people who are making this possible. You see here the sponsors, the Gilbert Ruf, the Ernst-Gunnar Stiftung, Hauser Stiftung, André Hoffmann, Hans-Jörg Wies, Martin Hefner, Fondation ProTechno, ESA BIC and Swisscom. Of course, I want to really thank them for enabling, and we're always looking for new supporters as well to continue strengthening this amazing ecosystem. Download the report. All the details are here. And thank you again for welcoming us. Looking forward to follow the rest of the presentations.
Merci beaucoup, Jordi, for sharing these impressive numbers. Up next, we have Stefan Steiner here on stage. He's the co-managing director at Venturelab, and he will also talk about our new partner, Startup.ch.
Thank you very much, Silvan, for this kind introduction. As mentioned, I'm Stefan Steiner, co-managing director at Venturelab. And it's my great pleasure to introduce you to Startup.ch, the largest startup directory in Switzerland. I've picked the top 100 winner from last year, Planted, that you can get a bit of an insight what startups are publishing on Startup.ch. So funding news, also news, milestones, videos, awards, and of course description. But Planted is only one of 2,500 startups, and you also see we have investors on it, we have more financing round, and also different verticals. As already mentioned before, we partnered this year with the Swiss Venture Capital Report to strengthen the ecosystem and increase the quality also of the financing data. So the Swiss Venture Capital Report is a yearly report, and if you would like to dive into more news during the year, go to Startup.ch. You see the link down there or the QR code to also get monthly updates on the financing rounds. If you're eager to even get that daily, we also have a newsletter out there with financing rounds and also tips and tricks to get in front of investors and pitch to them. My name is Stefan Steiner, and I'm looking forward to seeing you on our newsletter in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stefan. So make sure that you sign up for the newsletter. Last but not least, we also have remotely joining us Simon Enderli. He's the CEO of the Swiss Entrepreneurs Foundation. So a very warm welcome to you, Simon, and let's switch over to Zoom.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Silvan, for the introduction. Thank you, Stefan and Thomas. Thanks a lot once again for the great work you have been doing in the last couple of months, creating the new VC report of Switzerland. That's great news. I'm just trying to share my screen. I hope it will work with us. Okay, thank you. Okay, I'd just like to give you a very quick insight into the Swiss Entrepreneurs Foundation, what we are actually doing, what we are trying to achieve. Since our beginning, or since the start of Swiss EF, we mainly follow three main topics. The first one is improving framework conditions on, let's say, political level. So we are trying to have a certain influence on politics. Startups, as you know, they still don't have a very strong voice in Bern, but we are working hard to improve that a little bit, coming back to that later on. Second one is the challenge of commercializing technologies. We are very strong in innovation in Switzerland, as you all know, but we are sometimes a little bit weak when it comes to the challenge of bringing those great technologies onto the market. Therefore, we have created our upscaling program, some details to that later on. And last but not least, venture capital. Stefan and also Thomas mentioned that we are having great numbers, especially in the lower rounds up to 5 million, but we are still struggling with bigger financing rounds, and we are trying to have at least a tiny impact on that with our Swiss Entrepreneurs Fund, which we are trying to have a little bit more capital also for bigger rounds. So back to politics. We call that a Swiss EF Shaper because it's about shaping politics a little bit. And for that, we have created SWESA. You have probably heard about that. SWESA is an association which is strongly focusing on politics. So we are working tightly together with André Silberschmidt and Judith Belesch and all the other politicians you can see here on the picture those are people who are really dedicated to the needs of startups in Switzerland, and they do want to have an impact when it comes to political questions. With Svesa, we support them with inputs from the startup ecosystem. You name it, it's about tax situations, it's about access to talent, it's about IP, and so on. So if you want to join, I warmly welcome you to join Svesa to bring in your inputs. We will directly forward them to the politicians, discuss it with them, and then try to bring it all the way up to the Federal Council. That's politics. The second one, as I mentioned before, is the upscaling program. We are focusing on companies which are already at the market, which achieve a certain number of turnover, which have employees, and that are shortly or already in the middle of the process of internationalization. How do we work with them? We offer scaling workshops with tailor-made expert teams. We have a pool of about 50 experts from all the different sectors and industries who can really provide hands-on support with the value of up to 80,000 Swiss francs, which are given out to the participating startups. We also provide direct access to investors from different areas. And also, of course, you have access as a participant to the whole Swiss EF network. For additional infos, upscaler.ch. On the right side, you can see a couple of startups which are already in the program. So at the moment, we are almost fully booked, but starting from March, there should be available slots again to join us. Have a look at that. Last but not least, the Swiss Entrepreneurs Funds, 250 million. In there, not really the number we hoped to achieve, but anyway, we could do a nice number of investments already. On the left side, you can see the direct investment, and on the right side, a few investments we have made into third-party funds. And not going too much into the detail, but we are actually thinking about launching a second Swiss Entrepreneurs Fund, but that's too early for more details. Thanks again for having me. Thanks a lot, and have a great day, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon, for sharing your impressive activities and initiatives. Now I'm going to switch back here to the computer. So that's it for today. It's a wrap. Make sure that you head over to the Startupticker.ch website to download your personal PDF of the report. And I would say keep building amazing companies, keep investing in startups, and also keep pushing the boundaries so that hopefully 1 year from now, we can communicate and announce a new record for the Swiss startup ecosystem. Thank you all very much for joining, and I hope that you have a great day.